Welcome to part 3 of Exploring the XM, my Homebrew RPG campaign for your consideration. We're going to be going into the game world, and we'll be starting with the setting, which is Earth, but it is now called the XM. Inspirations taken from The Expanse, from Cyberpunk, a variety of game systems, game worlds, to come to this land where about 100 years ago a series of asteroids were hurtling towards Earth, and we banded together as a human race and took out the asteroids. But in doing so, the debris and the nuclear waste from all of that, activity wiped out a huge portion of Earth's inhabitable space. And not only that, but the debris from these asteroids is expected to last for some hundreds of years, continuing to rain down in tiny, even pebble sized particles, but nonetheless, their erratic nature means that one misplaced pebble, asteroid pebble, can kill you. And of course, completely beats the Earth into unfarmable land and continues to ravage everything that it touches. Thankfully, we've been able to algorithmically calculate a lot of the places where those little bits of debris storms will go. And so we've been able to build a number of cities within that and even map out routes between each city. So, of course, we would never take a direct route from one city to the next, but thanks to these coordinates that we have, we're able to navigate between each of the cities in this sort of roundabout way. So you do need access to these coordinates, which is not always publicly available because the world is run by the state, a government entity who is overseeing the some tens of millions of population that remains. And they don't like releasing information where it's not completely necessary. They like holding on to power as much as is possible. Now, the state has gained the respect, or at least the due trust of the populace, thanks to an event that happened in 2187, and we're currently in 2230. If you can't see the calendar that we'll keep track of during the campaign. But in 2187, the state purged society of the group of scientists and engineers who had developed much of technology up until that point. Now, this sounds horrible, but what it allowed to happen was the encrypted information that ran all the software of this technology was inaccessible to the big corporations that were quickly becoming unstoppable in their power, and who are incredibly influential today. But had it not been for that moment in 2187, the corporations would have gotten full control of electricity, of power, of the literal electric power and all that good stuff, and the internet. But because of the encryption and how it was all set up by these enlightened ones who are no longer around thanks to the state, that is all free to the public these days. So anyone has access to the internet. Anyone has access to power thanks to Tesla centers, as they're called. And these corporations will look to control everything else that they possibly can. But at least this very, very low but basic level of quality of life can be maintained thanks to what the state did at the time, and forever earning the trust and respect, if you can call it that, at least the loyalty of the populace. Nonetheless, the state does kind of rule with an iron fist, and they keep track of everything. They take a look at all of your transactions, make sure that you're not doing anything outside of their template of humanity that they like to uphold. So here we find our party in one of these cities that is located in Sector XM5, one of the only two publicly disclosed sectors still in existence. XM3 is the most prosperous one. It's some 2,000 miles to the east. And that's where Mecca is, the massive city that has a huge percentage of the remaining population. And so we're sort of on the outskirts here, um, but you can see the sort of falling debris, and you can see kind of the drudgery that people live in. But thankfully, these little pockets, these little cities, have a lifespan that was algorithmically calculated from those enlightened ones, those scientists and engineers. And so we know exactly, or at least we don't, but the state presumably knows exactly how long these cities are going to last. And so within the city, we have a society run by, difficulty to get work, to get good, sort of above board jobs, and never ending influence of corporations who are doing everything seedy and manipulative that they can. And they certainly will be giving out jobs if the players are interested in kind of dipping into the dark side of those. And then, of course, there's gangs and organized crime that operate even between those lines. Um, and then the state itself, which is not very easy to get along with. So a lot of these institutions are very overbearing, and it's not going to be uncommon for you to find that some of the minor gangs might be some of the most reasonable people you encounter in the XM. And so within all of that, you might be doing jobs like going out and scavenging the debris of fallen vessels as you ride your very, very like low level kind of spaceships. You could, of course, at some point get a spaceship and go to Mars or the moon where things are starting to happen and colonies are starting to form, and there's more and more hope for those becoming major players as they do develop. Um, but meanwhile, your little ships will be flying across these debris fields, and you will have your hands full just maintaining order on that ship, and hopefully everyone in the party is good at their job, whether they're the pilot or the engineer or the tech specialist, to get you to safety. But of course, out in these dangerous lands, it's not easy to travel because you might be paying taxes on the safe XM routes, but the unsafe XM routes, maybe the ones that have been decommissioned that you're not allowed to go on anymore, are filled with pirates who might be after you. Maybe you could turn the tables on them. So travel is very treacherous between these cities. Living in these cities is very treacherous, and the state is constantly keeping an eye out for those that step outside of the lines. So there's even going to be things like heat meters, crackdown meters, things that are keeping track of you, um, so that the state is going to kind of feel like they're nipping at your heels. Meanwhile, you're hopefully building good relationships within the underworld and within the legal realm to balance yourself out. Hopefully, not making too many enemies, but it's always a tough one to succeed at. So, taking a look at lethality, and then we'll get into sort of some of the examples of the realism of the world. Um, Lethality is, I would say, medium high. It's not like every combat encounter is going to be you at the absolute brink. Um, but it's a punishing system. It's one where things will go wrong, and you will be reacting to those, and you're gonna have to make tough calls between two bad options. And hopefully, your preparations before taking a job are sufficient. So this is not something where you just say, "Hey, I heard about this big payday over here, and we're going to go after it." It's more akin to you feeling it out. Is this something we want to take on? Talk to the party. Maybe we could do a little due diligence and go feel it out. Do some activities within the city, within the underbelly. Go to our relationships. See what we can find out about this job. See if it's a safe one for us to take. Maybe if there's a safer route for us to take or a safer way for us to go about it. Maybe after all that, we could renegotiate the terms of the agreement. Can we play this criminal organization against another? What are they looking for? What can we exploit without getting ourselves killed? Because maybe we'll pull it over on them this time, but the next time they're not going to forget. And maybe once once they've paid us off that one time, maybe we're gonna wake up with a knock on the door at some point. Um, so, and at that point, maybe we need to have a good friend on the opposite side of the alliance. So, having said all of that, it's the world. If you try and make anything of yourself, the world is going to try and break you. Um, the state will try and take you, and the rest will try and kill you, probably. Um, so don't be overly tied to your character, but hopefully those close calls will make your experiences with that character that much more fulfilling. The last one I'm going to talk about is some of the elements of sort of the realism within the world. So um, it's a little bit on the the more serious side, of course, compared to like a high magic campaign of Dungeons and Dragons. You can be a quirky character, right? I mean, hey, there are all sorts of narcotics in this world. There's all sorts of things that could bring you up and bring you down, and maybe your character is one who struggles with a lot of that kind of stuff. Um, Maybe you have that addiction's an expensive one to keep up with, and if that's the type of character you play, that's fantastic. But there's there's consequences for every action, and if you screw someone over, don't expect them to forget about it. The world will react harshly to the things that you do to it. So, kind of playing the diplomacy game is going to be an important one that I'm hoping to really have be a big part of this campaign. The people that you interact with will remember there is a system for enemies turning into neutral relationships, turning into positive relationships, and vice versa. If you negotiate for that better price on that deal, you might get it. You might get a great price, but now your positive relationship turns into a neutral relationship. And maybe that's going to be the difference between you getting that crucial piece of information the next time you go to them for that tip off on a job. Um, and then meanwhile, the state is going to be following up on everything. If you're using I won't get into the super minutia, but if you're using a certain type of payment system, the state has the opportunity to monitor those payments if and only if they have reasonable cause, a warrant essentially, to look into that. So maybe you'll use that payment system. It's a little bit safer, a little bit easier to get a hold of, not as dangerous to carry around unregistered credits, which I won't get into right now. But if you then piss off the state, if you allow them to pick up your trail, now they might be able to take a look at that information. What else can they gain? Can they figure out who your contacts are? Can they figure out where you've gone, what you've spent money on? How will that help kind of bring the breadcrumbs to you and your party? Um, and this is one where, there are 10 levels in this game. It's not 20 level characters. You get to 10th level at the most. And by that time, if the state has not absolutely made your life difficult, uh, yeah, I'm impressed. I'm impressed. Um, all right. Well, with that, that's going to conclude part three. That's a general picture of the game world. Next, we're going to go into the game system and run through that as briefly as I can on each step before we then look forward to the future of deep dive rules and all that kind of stuff. Don't get overwhelmed, but if this is starting to feel a little bit overwhelming, maybe now's the time to bow out. Um, I look forward to the next steps here. Um, all right, have a good rest of your day, guys.